Jennifer Rapp stood at Taft Point, watching two figures disappear into the fading light below. 22 seconds after Dean Potter and Graham Hunt leaped from the cliff, she heard it, a loud thwack, then another. On May 16, 2015, two of the world's bravest wingsuit pilots attempted a precision flight through the narrow Lost Brother Notch. They wore special suits that let them fly like birds. But just seconds later, everything went terribly wrong. What did those sounds mean? This is the story of their last flight, and the shocking truth investigators would later uncover. Dean Potter was a legend, a dark wizard of the mountains, known for pushing the very edges of what humans thought possible. Born in Kansas in 1972, he grew up with a military father and a yogi mother, moving around quite a bit. His journey into the extreme began almost by accident. As a young man, he found a piece of climbing gear and, out of curiosity, climbed up to investigate. This first climb turned into an unplanned 200-foot solo ascent, setting the stage for a life lived on the edge. Potter saw the world differently than most. He often spoke of being able to see air and move through it, as if the very atmosphere became a visible path for him. He didn't just climb or jump, he danced with danger, calling his extreme feats art or even a form of spirituality rather than just a sport. He stated many times that he did not want to die. Instead, he explained that facing death and the very real possibility of it made him feel truly alive and free. This deep personal drive, perhaps tied to his inner world and even a serious hearing difficulty, propelled him into activities that brought him to a hyper-aware state, a feeling he described as an addiction. Dean became famous for his incredible abilities. He was a pioneer in free soloing, a daring style where he climbed massive rock walls without any ropes or safety gear. He also set astonishing speed records on famous climbs like Half Dome and El Capitan's Nose in Yosemite National Park. One of his most remarkable achievements was the first solo ascent of the Super Canaleta route on Fitzroy in Patagonia, a feat that cemented his place in climbing history. Not content with traditional climbing, Dean created a new, wild way to climb called free basing. This involved climbing without ropes, but with a special base parachute rig strapped to his back. The idea was that if he fell, he could open the parachute and glide to safety. It was a risky mix of free solo climbing and base jumping, pushing the boundaries of both sports. He was also a leading figure in wingsuit flying, wearing special suits that made him glide through the air like a bird. In August 2009, he set a world record for the longest wingsuit flight, soaring for 2 minutes and 50 seconds from the Eiger Mountain in Switzerland, covering an incredible 3.4 miles. This amazing feat earned him the Adventurer of the Year title from National Geographic. Dean Potter was no stranger to controversy, and his bold actions often put him at odds with others. In 2006, he climbed Delicate Arch in Utah, a protected natural landmark. This climb caused a huge outcry, with many people angered by his disrespect for the environment. The controversy was so strong that one of his major sponsors, Patagonia, decided to stop supporting him. Another big controversy arose when he started base jumping with his Australian cattle dog, Whisper, strapped to his back in a special pack. Videos of these jumps went viral, captivating many viewers who saw it as daring. However, a large number of critics were outraged, calling it reckless and even cruel to the animal. Dean, however, saw Whisper as his true partner in adventure. He took great care to design a safe rig for her, working on prototypes for 2 years to ensure her comfort and safety. He also explained that Whisper was more than just a pet. She helped him navigate the world with his hearing difficulties and had even saved him from poisonous rattlesnakes on trails. For Dean, Whisper was family, and he didn't want to leave her behind. As the date of his final jump drew closer, the public controversies faded into the background, replaced by something far more personal. Dean Potter carried his own dark premonitions. In his writings, he described vivid, recurring nightmares, falling out of the sky, plummeting toward a dead tree that spiked upward like the hands of a corpse. To him, these weren't just dreams. They felt like warnings. In the weeks leading up to his final jump, friends noticed he was unusually pensive, even fatalistic, as if some part of him sensed what was coming. Graham Hunt, known as Grahambo to his close friends, was 29 years old when he died. Unlike Dean Potter, Graham was a much quieter person. He didn't seek fame, sponsors, or the spotlight. and he had almost no online presence. This meant that outside of a small, tight-knit group of climbers and jumpers in Yosemite, most people didn't know who he was. But this obscurity was misleading. Within Yosemite's close-knit community, Graham was deeply respected and considered probably the most prolific jumper in Yosemite. People often turned to him when situations became tricky in the mountains, relying on his steady and reliable nature. He was known for being quietly charismatic, giving big, heartfelt hugs, and taking local kids bouldering. Graham's journey in extreme sports was swift and impressive. In just 5 years, he had rapidly become one of the best wingsuit flyers in the world. He was particularly known for his ability to fly precisely next to someone with a camera, often laughing joyfully after a successful flight. Most importantly, Graham wasn't just Dean's sidekick, he was his trusted partner and equal. In 2013, Graham had been right there with Dean during his record-setting wingsuit flight from the Eiger Mountain in Switzerland. While news reports often focused on Dean's achievements, Graham was there for many of them, showcasing the same precision and skill that made Dean famous. Graham and Dean became very close friends through their shared love of jumping. Graham was Dean's trusted partner, his compadre, and they flew together often. While news reports often focused on Dean's many achievements, Graham was right there with him on many of them. Graham, like Dean, also believed in the immense freedom and inner peace found in pushing limits, despite the inherent dangers. He was someone who knew the risk of these activities, but truly believed that he would be 75 years old and still doing this, demonstrating a profound commitment to his chosen path. This shared belief system, combined with their exceptional skills, created a powerful partnership that allowed them to navigate some of the world's most dangerous environments. The date was May 16, 2015. The time was around 7:30 p.m. As the sun began to set, Dean Potter and Graham Hunt stood at Taft Point in Yosemite National Park. This spot is a towering cliff, about 7,500 feet above sea level and roughly 3,000 to 3,500 feet above the valley floor. Their plan was a proximity wingsuit flight, which meant flying incredibly close to the giant rock walls of the valley. Their specific goal was to slice through a narrow, V-shaped gap in the rocky ridgeline known as Lost Brother. This was not their first time attempting this dangerous maneuver. They had jumped from Taft Point and flown through the Lost Brother Notch at least 5 times before, a path well known among wingsuit flyers for its extreme danger. The conditions that night were far from ideal. The light was fading fast as dust settled, and heavy rain clouds hung ominously in the sky. Dean wore a bright red wingsuit, while Graham wore a black and yellow one, designed to help them glide through the air like diving birds. Jennifer Rapp, Dean's longtime girlfriend, was there at the edge of Taft Point to film their launch. After they jumped, her plan was to drive to a designated meeting point in the valley where the men hoped to land. The flight through the narrow notch was incredibly difficult, demanding near-perfect control. The slightest mistake, measured in mere inches, could lead to a deadly crash. They would reach speeds of around 100 miles per hour during their descent. Just before the jump, Graham tried to text his girlfriend, Rebecca Haney, who was waiting below for them, but he couldn't get the message to send. He zipped his phone into his pocket. Dean had an iPhone strapped to the back of his helmet, positioned to record Graham flying behind him. The video captured Dean saying, "Ready?" just before they leaped. This act of filming each other, even in such a dangerous activity, speaks to a shared purpose beyond just the jump itself, perhaps for review, for sharing their art, or as a testament to their synchronized flying. It reveals a deep level of trust and coordination, where one partner's success and even documentation was reliant on the other's precise execution. It is important to remember that base jumping is illegal in all U.S. national parks, including Yosemite. Jumpers caught often face fines or have their equipment confiscated. However, for these athletes, the risk of death always loomed much larger than any legal trouble. With a final word from Dean, the two men jumped from the edge of Taft Point. The light was dim, and their drop was incredibly fast. Within seconds, Jennifer Rapp lost sight of them as they disappeared below the horizon, swallowed by the vastness of the Yosemite Valley. Jennifer, still at the launch point, felt her heart pound in her chest. Seconds into the flight, Jennifer, photographing from the brink, told investigators she heard a thwack, followed just a second later by another. Her mind raced, caught between two terrifying possibilities. Was it the sound of their parachutes finally opening, a sign of safety and success? Or was it something much, much worse? The sound of impact against the unforgiving rock. The uncertainty was agonizing, a tormenting battle between hope and fear. Jennifer waited. She waited for the text message Dean always sent after landing, the simple, all clear that would let her know he was safe. But as the minutes dragged on, stretching into what felt like hours, the silence from her phone became louder and louder, a deafening absence of the expected message. She desperately tried to find another explanation for the silence. Maybe park rangers had caught them. It wouldn't be the first time a base jumper had disappeared, only to turn up later in police custody. This thought, though unpleasant, offered a sliver of hope, a desperate alternative to the growing dread in her heart. With nothing more she could do at the launch site, Jennifer drove quickly to the designated meeting spot in the valley where the men were supposed to land. But there was still no sign of them. Her fragile hope of them being arrested slowly faded with each passing moment. She returned to Dean's house, where she met Graham Hunt's girlfriend, Rebecca Haney, who was also waiting anxiously, her face etched with worry. It was now 10 p.m., and the park was pitch black. Both women were extremely concerned, their worst fears beginning to take hold. They decided to contact the authorities, reporting the men missing. They specifically asked if any base jumpers had been arrested in Yosemite that night. When the answer from the dispatcher came back, no, Jennifer broke down into tears. In her heart, she knew the terrible truth. The sounds she heard back at Taft Point were not parachutes opening. Park rangers immediately began a search through the night, but the darkness and the immense rugged landscape of Yosemite Valley made it impossible to find anything. The agonizing night finally gave way to morning. With the first light of day and the crucial assistance of a California Highway Patrol helicopter, the search teams at last found what they were looking for. Lying about 50 yards apart at the base of the towering cliffs were the bodies of Dean Potter and Graham Hunt. The grim discovery confirmed Jennifer's worst fears. Neither of their parachutes had been opened. They had died on impact. The key to understanding what happened in those final, terrifying seconds lay with Dean Potter's helmet. Strapped to the back of it was an iPhone, set to record Graham Hunt flying just behind him. This small device held the shocking truth of their final moments. National Park Service investigators used this crucial video footage, along with still photographs taken by Jennifer Rapp from the launch site, to piece together the sequence of the accident. The iPhone video, though it stopped abruptly after just 22 seconds, revealed a terrifying sequence of events. It showed Graham Hunt flying just behind Dean, clipping the right side of the narrow lost brother notch. This was the first impact, likely the first thwack Jennifer heard from the launch point. In a split second, Dean Potter reacted. To avoid crashing into Graham, who was tumbling after his impact, Dean swooped sharply to his left. This immediate, instinctive, evasive maneuver meant to save him, tragically put him on a collision course with the opposite side of the notch. He lost altitude and hit the lower end of the left side. This was the second impact, the second thwack Jennifer heard. The video showed Dean just a foot or two above the ground right before it stopped, capturing his final, desperate moments. In just 22 seconds, the entire flight was over. 2 impacts, 2 lives lost. Autopsies performed after the recovery of their bodies showed that Dean Potter had struck headfirst, while Graham Hunt hit with the front of his body. Tests also confirmed that no alcohol or illegal drugs were in their systems, ruling out any chemical impairment that could have affected their judgment or abilities. Furthermore, equipment inspections found no flaws in their wingsuits, meaning the gear itself did not fail. These findings pointed to the accident being a result of the flight itself, rather than external factors like substance use or faulty equipment. Even with the helmet camera footage, Jennifer Rapp's still photographs, and detailed investigations, the exact reason why Dean Potter and Graham Hunt missed the gap and crashed remains unknown. No one but Potter and Hunt will ever truly know what happened, investigators concluded. Still, park officials and experts have thought a lot about what might have happened in those quick 22 seconds before the crash. One theory points to misjudged height or a simple mistake. Flying in a wingsuit means you have to be incredibly precise. Even a tiny mistake in how high they were from the ground, or a small error in figuring out their path through the tight space, could have led to the crash. Reports said that miscalculation and not being able to decide fast enough were possible reasons. The path through Lost Brother was very narrow, leaving almost no room for mistakes. Distraction was also considered. Just before the jump, Graham Hunt tried to text his girlfriend. Even though he put his phone away, that brief moment, or even thinking about it, might have messed with his focus. Dean, too, might have been distracted if he saw Graham hit the ground, causing him to flinch or misjudge his own path. Air turbulence is another idea. The air around huge rocks like those in Yosemite can be very tricky. A small gust of wind or bumpy air could have pushed one or both men off their perfect path, especially since they were going over 100 miles per hour. Finally, some suggested a clipped tree. There were mentions of a broken piece of a tree found near their flight path. This made some wonder if Graham might have hit a tree just before crashing into the rock. But this is just a guess and can't be proven. The news of Dean Potter and Graham Hunt's deaths rippled through the climbing and extreme sports world, sparking renewed debate over Yosemite's ban on base jumping and the risks of pushing limits in such unforgiving terrain. Critics argued that the park had become a dirty gym for extreme sports enthusiasts, far from the pristine wilderness it was meant to preserve. Their deaths became a symbol of what happens when the pursuit of the ultimate thrill meets the unforgiving reality of nature. Even the most skilled, most prepared athletes are ultimately at the mercy of forces beyond their control.